I see so many familiar faces. I wanted to take a moment, if we can go around where you're calling from and your name, that'll be lovely. We can start, well, I'm calling in from Petaluma.
I'm Genesis. I'm calling in from Miami, Florida.
I'm Josefa Vaughn with Art Seed, and I'm here at Tides in the Presidio of San Francisco.
I'm Gina. I'm calling in from the East Bay in Dublin, California.
I'm Dave. I'm calling from Marin County.
Hi, I'm Betty. I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California.
I'm Tara. I'm calling in from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hey, I'm Jerry. I'm calling in from San Marcos, Texas.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm Julie Hazelwood, and I'm calling in from Santa Cruz, California.
I'm Nora. I'm calling in from Barcelona, Spain.
Oh, I'm also in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
We had some chats come in. CJ's calling in from El Paso, and Jen is calling in from Pasadena.
Wonderful. I'm very happy today to be introducing our new team member, Julián Antonio Carrillo, who brings over a decade of experience working with different organizations and diverse populations as an anthropologist, a folklorist, and community development consultant. He received his doctoral degree in anthropology with an emphasis on cultural heritage. The theme on exploring creativity and aging within community came about when Julián and I were discussing his experience working with the elders in Oaxaca, Mexico, while working on his dissertation. And as I was reflecting on our founders' work and many of our board members, and on the important roles which our elders contribute to community development and leadership and creativity, I'm really happy to be introducing Julián, who'll be presenting his work. So welcome, Julián.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll take it away then, right? Thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and the sound because there's a few bits of information there, okay? Welcome. The title, as you know, Exploring Creativity and Aging in Community. Can everyone see this map?
Yes.
Great. Well, the Mixteca region of Oaxaca, Mexico, which you're seeing here, is a predominantly rural area in which several indigenous groups have lived there for millennia. This is a bit of the landscape. The region is named after its most prominent group, the Mixtecos, or New Savi, one of the several groups in Oaxaca that identify as the people of the rain. Whether indigenous or non-indigenous, the region's people are undeniably traditional. What I mean by this is that even when embracing modernity, they largely respect and value what has come before them and pass it on to new generations. This is evident in the richness of the region's foodways, social organization, religion, rituals, etc. One tradition that is precisely held onto and recreated in the Mixteca is the maroma. The maroma, I'll zoom out a little bit here. The maroma is a circus-like art form performed under an open sky on wooden or metallic structures. You can see one here on my screen. These structures are tied together with thick rope or maroma. The word comes from the Spanish Arabic mabruma, meaning twisted rope. Whereas today's maromeros, or as those that perform it self-identify, refer to the rope simply as cuerda, cord, or alambre, wire. In the past, the word maroma also referred to those who used it to perform their art. This is why in the Americas, maroma also means an acrobatic jump and a circus performance in which acrobatic exercises are executed. Now, there's a long history of the maroma in New Spain, the territory that today is Mexico and parts of the US, including here in New Mexico, where I'm zooming in from. I won't get into this here, but suffice to state that the maroma is a blend of medieval European and native Mesoamerican acrobatic and verbal arts. These came together in New Spain, where the maroma was very popular for 300 years, including 200 years before the modern European circus was created in Europe. As such, the maroma can be considered the seed of the modern circus in the Americas. This figure is of a book from 1939 of an author who explores the maroma in the 19th century. As you can see, some of these structures are very similar to what we just saw. The maroma of today in the Mixteca is a unique performance in which ordinary but brave women and men transform into poets, acrobats, theater actors and actresses. They momentarily leave aside their jobs, schools, or everyday duties of farm life to also try to transform their public by way of wonder and shared laughter, all while honoring saints and deities in Catholic patron saint fiestas and other events. You can see in this picture, I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see that the Catholic Church in the background and the maroma structures in front of it. There's also tightrope dancing. For some indigenous groups in the region, the maroma is also a ritual of communication with God's saints and pre-Hispanic deities, necessary to transform the rural landscape and mountainside with rain, and in this way, paint it green and provide a good harvest. Here's an example of one such maroma, where it's practiced more as a ritual, also a ritual of diversion too, you know. The maroma's social base is intergenerational. This includes kids, youth, adults, and elders. These are all individuals, families, companies, and communities that dedicate part of their existence to performing the maroma, either as a form of paid labor or as a community ritual in which money is not usually a factor. But whether as a job or as a ritual or a combination, the maroma is clearly a community, it's clearly done in community. You can see some of the maroma companies. Companies are groups of maromeros. They can be either related by family or simply be part of the same village. Now, how is the maroma a clear example of something done in community? Well, as you can see here, it literally takes a village to lift the structures, okay? But also, I'll go back to this, but also to perform, you need a maroma company, right? You need those members that are gonna be on the tightrope, that are gonna be the clown poets, or the actors and actresses. But also you need the help of other people in the community, including in the maroma brass bands, which are really important in Oaxaca. So I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. The clown poets in the maroma, they usually perform with a band in an exchange, a musical exchange. I have a recording here I'd like to share with you of what this means. So you're going to hear in this clip the clown poet, and then you're going to hear the brass band respond in the same melody. And then you're going to hear the poet again, and then the brass band responds in this dynamic that goes on in performance. Here it is.
Llegan las recuas del yanque, que la vuelta del reino un millón, que le han de sanar el trasero para el presente señor del Señor.
Okay, so even though you can't understand the lyrics, they're in Spanish, they're a little bit hard to understand. This is a field recording from an actual maroma. So these are just a few examples of how the maroma is a community event. Now, in this sense, it's important to keep in mind that the maroma is not taught in schools, nor are there instructional videos or materials to learn it. Rather, like many traditional arts, it is passed on through relationships. You become a maromero by being in community, by participating in it, and by doing it. Of course, this happens with the help of your peers and your elders. This is the picture of an elder maromero. And some of the maromeros that I had a privilege of meeting and sitting down with, you know, there are campesinos, they're peasants with vast knowledge of and experience of farming. And also, like many other Mixtecos, these are people who have migrated, some of them, to other parts of Mexico or even to the US for long periods of time. Here's another maromero to the left. And here's another elder maromero who I'll talk about in just a second. Some of these folks, these elders, come from long-established maroma families, such as the case of Don Porfirio Mendez, who you're seeing here. I conducted his life history and learned that his great-grandfather had a Circo de Legua, which is a traveling circus that presented all over Oaxaca, Puebla, and Guerrero. This takes us way back to the 1860s, okay? And the circus included all kinds of games, including mirror games, but also puppets and the maroma. Don Porfirio himself inherited the art of puppeteering, as well as being a clown poet. Here, for example, is a picture, a scanned picture of a book that he has of maroma poetry. And this is really elevated, that dates back to the 19th century, really elevated poetry, sort of almost like Shakespearean in its complexity, okay? This is an example of a song called The Life of the Poor Artist. It's in Spanish, La Vida del Pobre Artista. And it talks about how difficult it is to be a maromero, you know? I could go through it, but it would take a little bit of time. But he performs this, and it was passed on from his father and his grandfather, but he also adds verses to it. Now, this is Don Venustiano, sorry. He's also a clown poet, and he does not come from a family tradition of maroma. Rather, as a young man, he was invited to participate in his community's maroma. And he's been performing since the 1950s, really. Even now in his early 90s, he's still performing and teaching others. We'll get back to him in just a second. This is Don Avelino, one of the closest people that I got to, one of the maromeros in my time in Oaxaca. And others like Don Avelino, you know, they didn't become maromeros until old age. So as you can see, there's different ways of becoming maromeros, but they share that they love this performance. Now, these performers, oh, we'll stick here with this one. This is Don Venustiano as Chiquilin, that's his clown poet name. These elders and others that I interviewed in Oaxaca, I call them maroma revivalists because they're trying to restore a tradition that has been lost in their towns for the benefit of society. In exploring creativity and aging amongst this community of maroma elders, I've identified at least 4 areas in which the maroma plays a positive role. One of them is that the maroma is a physical activity. As you saw some pictures of people building the structure, you know, it takes activity, obviously physical activity to do that. There's also parts of the maroma where there's a lot of walking. And of course, there's acrobatics as well. Number 2, the maroma is an intellectual activity. They are stimulated by writing, creating, or performing poetry of great complexity, like I just showed. Number 3, the maroma keeps elders socially engaged with their peers, but also other members of their community. And number 4, and I'd like to focus on that a little bit more, is that the maroma is a vehicle for generativity. The concept of generativity was coined by developmental psychologist Erik Erikson in the 1950s and is defined as the concern in establishing and guiding the next generation. Folklorist John Kay has worked at the intersection of this concept in the folk arts, arguing that passing on traditional knowledge and skills can be seen as a special kind of generativity. Moreover, Kay recognizes that generativity flows in two directions. The stories and skills that pass to the next generation are an expression of an older adult's care for the future. Equally, however, he says, an elder needs to feel their gifts are well received. In my time in Oaxaca with Maromeros, I witnessed this happening in the community and participants speaking about it too. An example is Don Venus, as you can see here in this picture. In several meetings, I saw him take over the microphone, meetings of Maromeros, I should say, with multiple generations involved. And he gave a long speech about how important the Maroma was for him. And he invited new generations to participate. I'm going to read a part of that speech because I think it highlights what he sees in the Maroma. I quote, "With all due respect to the public, I'd like to say a few words and share an experience with the youth and kids that want to perform the role of the clown. I want to invite all the elders that are integrated into the Maroma to invite the children. Because some kids with only 10 or 12 years of age start drinking alcohol or doing drugs. And so that they don't suffer from this, we must integrate them into the Maroma so that they may learn to be part of a community." And also, he said, and for those young folks already part of the Maroma, I want to say, take care of yourselves from alcohol, from tobacco and drugs. I don't want you to suffer like I suffer, he said. I'll finish this quote real quick with just another insight that he gave in that same speech. He said, "The role of the clown in the Maroma is very important for the public in general. Once at a fair, a psychologist went up to talk to me after a Maroma and he said, 'You were the first clown I saw when I was a kid. You would bring me joy. And now that I have my career, I want to congratulate you because you are a doctor,' he said. 'You are a doctor of hearts and you don't realize it. You cure people without knowing it. When you are acting, reciting verses, you make people laugh. Even if they don't laugh out loud, inside, their hearts are smiling." End quote. Don Venus in this meeting was visibly and audibly moved as he himself was in front of an audience that appreciated him. That was back in 2013. Today, he's part of a small Maroma company called Super Águila Mixteca and is performing with at least two very talented young men. And if there's time, I'd like to show a very small clip of him performing. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great. So here he is. This is Don Venus. This is a tribute that the youth, the Maroma company, the young people who manage this technology made to him, okay? I'm going to stop it there, but I hope that gives you an idea. I know it was very short, but an idea of what the Maroma Mixteca entails. And of course, we'll have time for some questions. I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Julián. Well, wonderful. Gosh, Julián, you shared a lot of rich information here. And I wanted to take this moment to maybe pull a thread out from this weave that you kind of brought together. And the theme that came up for me was how you shared about the elders trying to really restore tradition, right? Restoring traditions, and the quote from one of the elders about bringing in the children, right? So there's more of this interactiveness happening. And I wanted to take a moment to open up this conversation a bit with our own interactions with elders. And I know that Tamra, who is on our board and one of our dignitaries, you work in a clinic at the First Nations over in Albuquerque. And one of the conversations that her and I have quite often is her observations of the elders there, right? And we never really had a chance to share a bit about your observations in this, context in a conversation, what their needs are and what you see is lacking within the community there. If you don't mind sharing a bit. And I think you need to unmute. There you go.
Yes. Yes, Heidi. I do work at a community health center. It's here in Albuquerque. It is, I guess the neighborhood that we're located in is very diverse. It's called the International District. We do see a lot of, different cultures, a lot of, different ethnicities. We do see a lot of Native American families, and just show, I guess you can kind of see, the culture. You see the children or the parents bringing their elderly parents in for visits. I feel like sometimes, the elderly, I feel bad about services that are needed for them. There are a lot of elderly in this neighborhood that, don't have maybe family that can take care of them, which is kind of sad. But we do our best to provide different services. Right now, we're doing a lot of COVID vaccines. We are doing home visits. So we're trying to get a lot of the elderly patients that can't come in, for medical care. We're trying to go to their home and at least do vital signs, making sure that they're good, providing those COVID vaccines for them in their home. So, they don't have to leave, because a lot of them, they don't have proper transportation, and it's hard taking city transportation. But I don't know, it's a rewarding job, honestly. I love working here. I've been here for almost 10 years, and I feel like the community work that we do, all the outreach work that we do is it's rewarding for me, because I feel like we help a lot of people. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you shared is about the lack of services. Yeah. Anyone here also would like to elaborate a bit, maybe relate to something that Tamara has shared or you've heard in Julián's presentation, regarding mostly the elders within our own communities or maybe within our own work?
Josefa, you want to share?
Sure. I actually, curiously, yesterday on my pretend day off, did something I've been wanting to do for myself personally relative to my now being a senior citizen and my husband being 82. I walked into one of these places that are senior living, HUD, I think they're assisted living, and just got a phone number to try to talk with someone about what's the eligibility. And it's not something my husband will talk about, what's to become of us if I'm not working with Artseed, if we don't live in the Presidio, and are we even in an economic bracket to be able to be eligible for assisted living in San Francisco. And I realized what an awkward topic. Who do I even know that will talk with me about these things? And being able to get someone on the phone who didn't know that much actually, and is going to have someone call, was a start for me. I felt like I broke some kind of barrier about, number one, admitting I am not quite elderly, but getting there. And I have a husband who doesn't act it, but he's elderly. And so we're in a lucky situation, but a lot of people are not. Now let's find out what a lot of people are going through, in a hands-on way. And seeing seeing that video and Julian's presentation is inspiring and makes you realize, why don't we have more of that here?
Yeah, one of the things that struck me was movement. Like, I don't to see these elders just moving, even though it was, awkward because they're in a clown costume, but to be able to have that mobility and then the enthusiasm to read poetry or to sing or even to be, putting on the makeup. It's,
playfulness.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
At that age, to be able to be playful,
right,
and outgoing, and risk all kinds of indignities to reach out to people. Yeah, that is being a doctor.
Agreed. If I may, I just wanted to pose maybe a different version of the same question that Heidi had, which is, I also wanted to invite you all, having, seen precisely these elders performing, to think about elders in your family and what practices they might, that you know of, or that you haven't thought about, maybe that where they were trying to guide the next generation to, I would love for us to share that if there's any examples, Thank you.
I'd like to share. So September 18th, my grandma passed away. She was 101 years old, and she still traveled. She still, she did a lot of public speaking, because she was one of our tribe's last fluent speaking Lakota speakers. So she would go to schools, do different, like I said, different, how would I say, different presentations for people. And it was just amazing. I mean, she was definitely out there trying to still, teach our language to younger people, since she was one of the last fluent speakers from our tribe. It was definitely a great loss when she did pass away, but people respected her right down to young children. I mean, they knew, hey, this is an elder, and they had a lot of respect for her. And it was just nice to see that, when we went back to South Dakota for her funeral. I mean, there were so many people there to honor her, and it made me proud just to see that, hey, this lady, up until her dying day, was, just a force, like to be there, just trying to share her culture and her language. And I don't know, it was nice.
I guess I could answer relative to my work. Artseed works with veterans, and so that's been a real interesting thing to be thinking about, people who are retired from the military force and what they have, the burdens they're having to carry based on the PTSD and other things that they have experienced. And it's so nice to hear Tamara talk about someone in her family she admires, because this is what I'm getting from the veterans. They're wanting to have that relationship with their family and feel that their family sort of understands what they've been through and has that same kind of rapport. and their art making helps them with that. Create. I have one that wants to, he has a huge cardboard box. He's living with his daughter, and a piece of furniture came in. He wants to keep that box, even though it takes up a lot of room, to make a museum for his family. And he's doing these little figurines. And I said, well, if Walt Disney can do it in the Presidio, you can do it.
I think from what Josefa has shared, what we're going to try and do is going to breakout rooms so we can maybe have more of an intimate time to share a little bit about how an elder in our family or our community or our workplace has impacted or influenced us in some creative way. Because as Josefa said so beautifully earlier, these are things that we don't really talk about. And it's awkward for, I know personally, a lot of people that I've worked with have a difficult time communicating in the workplace because of the generation gap, right? So this is an attempt for us to try and bring that conversation, on this platform. So I believe Genesis will be putting us in breakout rooms.
Yeah, let me work on the breakout rooms. Do we still want to do about 8 minutes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was interesting. We talked a little bit about the traditions of food, which is interesting. I think people were remember families and the love of cooking, things they had learned from their elders that way. I talked about teaching, and because I have several teachers in my family, and a respect for others. But most of our memories of others are very happy, as they should be, I think, with good examples.
I'll go next if you don't mind. Our group, it included Tamara, Betty, and Nora, and there was some really interesting things coming up. One of them was that Tamara thinks about her grandmother Sami Sunchild, and everything she left her and others, right? A love for conversation, a love for exploring the world, to being open to the world. I mentioned that it was almost like a whole philosophy of life was passed on. Betty talked about her grandparents and her dad in particular, how gardening, is something that he's very close to. It contributes to his well-being and of the community. But she also said that, it's really important to realize the value that traditional arts have for giving elders roles, because a lot of time in dominant US society, elders are isolated or put aside or sometimes seen as disabled. So that was another key insight. And then Nora talked about her grandmother, her late grandmother, who was a weaver and a knitter. And that at some point in her life, she started knitting herself, and her grandmother was overjoyed because they were sharing this practice. So I thought that was really important too. That's it.
Genesis, and how about in your group?
I was in a group with Dave. Dave and I were in a group. So yeah, we were talking, like Dave said, about our love for food and our positive experiences with our elders.
Nice.
Yeah, we had 3 groups, and Heidi, you led the 3rd one. What did you guys talk about?
Oh, Josefa is going to share. Yes.
Heidi more or less facilitated us talking, and it was fascinating to hear Julie talk about, when I asked about the elders in her life, was her school and the teachers that seemed to, factor in that category first in her mind. And then I was asking about friends. She said she's got a friend who's turned 65. And so now I was curious what they felt about being a senior citizen. And I was contrasting and comparing how my mother never told her age, but when she turned 65, she was always letting everyone know now she's a senior citizen, and she was somehow comfortable with her age. And I wasn't sure if most people are that way. We just talked about how it's, you know, sometimes we're in denial and we feel dismissed as we get older in our culture, but that the roots and routes works. That's part of what they do is having all kinds of cultures, not just Western and Eastern, but the nuanced cultures work with, you have to work with the elder. I mean, elders are what culture basically is. Would we even have culture if we didn't have elders? There wouldn't be any culture. So there probably wouldn't be any nature either. So it's, yeah, it's something that we find ourselves being immersed in, you know, with our works and our life.
I wanted to add, because I wanted to share this with everyone. So this piece of art that's behind me, that was made by Sami Sunchild in 1984. It's part of her scroll collection. So she made over, I have with me about 35 scrolls of different lengths. And this one she titled Resonating. Yeah, that's what she did. And I also wanted to share, Dave Whitridge wrote a book called School Days. So you have been my inspiration, David. And it's such a beautiful book that you've written here, because what he did was he wanted to leave something behind for his grandchildren and for the children to come. So Dave, I just wanted to tell you, thank you very much for leaving this, because it's really influenced me in wanting to leave something behind too for my children and their children's children.
What was the name of the book again, Heidi?
School Days.
School Days?
Yes, but he only, well, I'll let you share, David. There's not like, it's not like you can't go on Amazon.
No, thank you, Heidi. You won't find it on Amazon. I got about 25 copies printed privately, and I think I have 1 or 2 left, but Heidi might be able to share it with you. And I thank you for the kind words, Heidi. Well, one of the reasons I really wrote it was right after the school shooting in Florida. And I felt so impressed with those kids and how they were standing up and demanding change. And I also felt a little sad because my school days were all so happy, and they were we weren't scared of anything, and they were just sort of idyllic. We had some teachers maybe we didn't like, but there weren't any big problems. And so I just felt like I wanted to lay that all out and talk about the way it was for my grandkids, and hopefully get back to that someday.
Okay, anybody else wants to share before we wrap up?
I just want to share that I will definitely be sending this or showing this video to my grandma. Every time she says, you know, oh, I'm old, I can't do that anymore, I'm going to tell her, look, you can do maromas.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us for this 1 hour.